All right, Alexander, we've got to talk about an EU victory and a Polish defeat. And there is no other way to put it than that. Um, the the Polish government has knelt down and they've decided to kiss the ring of the European Union. Now all that's left to fight against the EU blob, the EU monster, is Viktor Orban in Hungary. This all goes back to this whole dispute with the judiciary and the judges in Poland. Basically, the European Union has forced Poland to concede that the European Court of Justice supersedes and oversees every single court in the European Union, which to me basically means why even have a legal system in the EU? Maybe have a legal system for petty crimes and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it is now the European Court of Justice, this one body that rules over us all, and the one holdout, the one country that was fighting this, and that even said they would leave the EU. They would leave the EU if push came to shove, was bluffing, and they have folded. And,
Absolutely.
This is just a sad, terrifying day in Europe.
Yeah. Let's just discuss how overarching this whole thing is, because of course you can agree or disagree with what the Poles were doing with their court system, but bear in mind that it is a sovereign prerogative of every country to run its own courts, to structure them as it chooses. We have a very, very complicated court system, for example, in the United Kingdom, one which has evolved over many centuries. So does France. Germany's is younger, so is Poland's, but every country has always had, up to now, the prerogative to run its court systems. And the courts administer the law. And in any state, it is the law that binds the country together, that gives authority, that gives government the power it exercises. Governments cannot function outside, a legal system, at least in countries like those of the West, which claim to be democratic. So who controls the courts and who decides how a court should be organised matters a very great deal. Now, you may agree or disagree with the way in which the Poles have organised their courts, but it's important to say that this European Court of Judgment decision was not about a decision the courts had made. It was about the way in which the courts were being organised. In other words, it is the European Union, the European Court of Justice, coming along and saying you should have a court that does this, and a court that does that, and a court that appoints judges in this kind of way, and a court that appoints judges in that kind of way. And if judges are to be disciplined, they should be disciplined in this way, but not in that. In other words, it is the European Union encroaching not just on the court system, but deciding about how the court system itself in a sovereign state should be organised. Now, that was the issue that the Poles said that they were going to fight over. I have to say, I always thought there was a risk that this was all ultimately a bluff. And the reason is that for historic reasons, many Poles, I don't just mean many Poles, I mean the great majority of Poles, are still deeply committed to the European Union. Poland remains a country where the European Union continues to be extremely popular. And the reason for that is that the Poles have not experienced the economic damage that the EU can do in a way that other countries have. Poland still retains its own currency. It still receives large amounts of funds from Brussels. It's, in fact, received, I believe, more funds per capita than almost any other European country has done. So the Poles have, in a way, benefited from the European Union. And for that reason, it is popular. It is also popular for national reasons, in that for the Poles, it's a way of distancing their country from Russia, which was, of course, during the Soviet period, the communist era, their former overlord. So there is that dimension in it all too. What they're now going to find is that because their government really wasn't in a position to stand up to the European Union over this issue, because to do so would have required a solid support within Poland over this question, and that solid support in Poland does not exist because the EU is still so popular in Poland. What the Poles are going to discover is that from now on, all the advantages of Polish membership of the EU are going to slowly, gradually ebb away. Because if you give the EU an inch, sooner or later they will come back and ask for a mile. I am sure you are familiar with the way in which Greece, 20 years ago, practically everybody supported Greece's membership of the EU. Same was true in Italy. Same was true in Spain and Portugal and France. But that was before the European Union began to grind them down. Now they open the doors to the EU and it is grinding them down. And the same, I predict, is going to happen to Poland.
Oh, they're going to grind them down, and it's not going to be an economic or political grind down. What it's going to be is a social, and you're already seeing it happen in Poland. From what I understand, they are going to, they already are, and the EU will destroy the fabric of Polish society, the social fabric. Family, religion.
Yeah.
The culture, the strong ties to the culture, the language, the EU will eat away at that, and it's going to cost Poland dearly. But that's going to be the plan for Poland. That's my hunch.
Absolutely,
and you'll get the economic stuff
Absolutely.
as well, because the EU is not going to be dishing
make.
out money like they were in the past, because they just don't have it. So you're going to have the economic well dry up, and then they're going to really attack Poland with the NGOs, with the Soros Foundation stuff, with the universities, and they're going to really attack Poland, the media, on a social fabric level, and it's going to hurt. It's going to be brutal.
Absolutely. I mean, I fully predict. I mean, there's going to be a major push over the next few years to get Poland into the euro. I have absolutely no doubt. If there's elections and the current government loses, which I think is now much more likely, by the way, then I think that there's a real probability, a strong prospect, that the next Polish government, which is going to be very, very committed to the EU project, is going to take Poland into the euro. It has already talked that, before this current government came to power, it was already on the agenda. And then, of course, on top of all the social issues that you were talking about, which are real, absolutely real, the economics will come into play also. And Poles will discover that there isn't just a social price, but there is also and a sort of price in a cultural price, if you like. There's also a very high economic price. And if you go to Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, wherever you will find people are paying that price now. And it is coming, because that is the nature of the EU machine. It expands, it brings more things under its control. It wants to centralize economic decision making, and when it does that, it will ultimately drain away the periphery in order to build up the core, because that is how the EU works. And anybody who doesn't understand that simply doesn't understand what the EU has become.
Well, let me tell you what the EU has won. The EU now controls, if you're in the euro, and Poland will enter the euro, it's going to be game over when they do. But if you're in the euro, the EU controls you financially on every single level. I've lived it. I've seen it. I've breathed it. There is no euro in the ATM unless the EU says so. So on a financial level, the EU controls everything. They control the corruption. They control the kickbacks. They control the flow of money. They can control the grants, everything. That they've got locked up. On a political level, they've also got it locked up. They're going to sniper out any opposition in France. I really believe that. And they're going to get their person in there, whether it's Macron or someone else. They'll figure out how to deal with Italy as well. And they'll wrap up Italy as well. and then they're just left with Hungary. So pretty much on a political level, they've got all the politicians in the bag. They're all corrupt. They've got them all in the pocket. They go up to Brussels. They sit at the table. They all laugh. They all talk about stupid stuff, and then they leave it to Van der Leyen and Michel, the people above Van der Leyen and Michel, to dictate.
And Christine Lagarde.
Christine Lagarde, a convicted felon who's running the ECB. And now they've just locked up the judiciary. That's basically what has happened. They've locked up the judiciary now. All that's left is the military, but that's coming too.
Well, the military is, and the military also in Poland apparently is not the force it was. I mean, it's been allowed to run down. So if you control the courts and therefore the administration of the law, and you control the money and therefore the lifeblood of the economy, what can a politician do? I mean, that takes away, think about it, any role for a politician in a country. They simply become an agent of the central power. You can vote them in and you can vote them out, but unless you find somebody who is able to mobilize a political majority to take the country out of the EU system entirely and accept all the massive dislocation and rupture that causes, then, as I said, if you run the money and you run the courts, you don't have to worry, because somebody can come along, say what they like, strike whatever poses, but it doesn't mean anything. And that's why this decision is as important as it is. So they've got this decision, they've got control of the Polish courts, they can get Poland into the euro, they've got control of its economy, and the decisions are no longer than made in Warsaw, they are made in Brussels, and at that point, Poland is far more subordinate in some ways to the EU centre than it even was when it was part of the Soviet system, because though the communist government in Poland was obviously loyal to the Soviet Union, it still preserved certain autonomous identities which the present system in Brussels doesn't tolerate. So you are actually going to see Polish independence, which so many Poles say they care about, eroded away even more. And that's the reality of it. Now, as you correctly said, there's one leader left who's holding out, who's Orban. They're going to be throwing everything they have at him between now and next year, when there's the elections in Hungary. We will see whether he can hold out. He's a far cannier figure than Kaczynski is in Poland. He's also doesn't have the kind of hang-ups that the Poles do. I mean, you once discussed how the Poles lack the clarity that the Hungarians do, because so many of them are still stuck with this Russophobia thing, which makes them look towards the EU and Brussels and as allies or potential allies, rather than as the threat they really are. So he's cleverer, he's much more capable, he has a far more solid political base in Hungary itself. Whether he will be able to withstand the storm which is to come, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, full control of the judiciary, and just in time for the passports. Keep that in mind. But
control the money, control the law, and what's left? Nothing.
Well, now they're gonna they want to control the individual, but they're
I know.
They're
the one leads to the other. Bear in mind, you see, that the police, for example, are ultimately always answerable to the courts, because that's the way every kind of system of law enforcement system works. So if you control the courts, you can ultimately control the police. If you control the money, you can control the banks. If you control the banks, you control everything. So it's the pathway to do it. It's astonishing that so few people still understand this.
Yeah, well, Orban is one of those people, it seems.
Absolutely.
He had Tucker Carlson in Hungary, which is a really good PR and media move, both for Orban and for Tucker. Tucker, I think, is sending the message to the Hungarians, to Orban and the Hungarian people, that there are people outside of their country that are pulling for them. But the EU is throwing everything they have at Orban. They're creating these really strange monstrosity type of coalitions in order to take him out, coalitions that don't seem even possible in a normal world, but they're cobbling them together in order to beat Orban in April during the elections. They're withholding money from the Hungarian people, money that could help them get back on their feet after all the restrictions and lockdowns and all that nonsense. And just recently, there's the news that Norway grants, which are grants from Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and other European economic areas that go to Central and Southern European countries, are now also being held back. Norway has decided to hold back, let me find the number, 77 billion forints, or euro 215 million, to Hungary. And the interesting part about it is that the Socialist Party in Hungary, go figure, the Socialist Party in Hungary is saying that if they get into power, then Norway will gladly release those funds. But if a Fidesz government is in power, then, well, those grants cannot be released. How about that?
Well, how indeed. But
election meddling?
Well, consider also the monstrous nature of the coalition that's being created. I mean, the Socialist Party, which you mentioned, which was the former governing party that ruled Hungary before Orban and Fidesz came to power, and which admitted that it had lied about the financial and economic situation of the country, and which brought Hungary to the point of economic collapse, is, of course, the reincarnation of the former Communist Party that ruled Hungary during the Soviet era. It is in alliance against Orban with Jobbik, which is the real far right. I'm going to avoid using the word, but the F party. We all know what I mean in Hungary. I mean, they are the real right wing, ultra right wing people in Hungary, with all the usual ideas, the sort of things that we condemn, the issues about Jews, all of that sort of thing. That's what Jobbik stands for. So they are in alliance with the Socialist Party, the former communists. They are backed by the EU and countries like the Netherlands and Poland. And they back these people against Orban, who they say is right-wing and a dictator. I mean, if you actually take a step back and think all this through, you realise how absolutely crazy this whole thing is. But of course, craziness is what we've become used to now. Europe today, I mean, Franz Kafka, you know, the famous Austrian surrealist writer, could never have come up with a system as complicated, as bizarre, as eccentric and as inconsistent and contradictory as the one we have now.
Well, I mean, I would argue that it's actually pretty simple what they want.
Well, it's simple what they want, but the way they do it...
And they don't care how they go about it. They
Oh, absolutely, of course they do. I mean, absolutely.
Or a communist party together. Once they get what they want, they'll dispose. Once again, they'll dispose of all the people that help them get there.
But as I said, you know, bear in mind, when you next hear about Orban being the dictator, look at the people who oppose him. Look at the people who oppose him in Hungary. And the next time you hear the EU and people like Mark Rutte in the Netherlands talk about themselves being the Democrats, and that's why they impose Orban, look to the people in Hungary whom they're currently supporting. Because their deeds do not match their words. They never have done.
No, whatever they call themselves is the opposite, and whatever they call someone else is the opposite. Yeah, so if they go when they go after Putin or Orban or Trump or anybody else, and they say they're dictators or this and that, it is the exact opposite. When they say that they're the Democrats and they believe in all these democratic values and human rights values, it's the exact opposite. That's the rule of thumb. So when Rutte sits there and says, I'm a Democrat and Orban is a dictator, just flip. Those words around.
Well,
you understand what's going on.
You need to,
and this is Rutte's pet project. Rutte's pet project is Orban and this alphabet issue.
Absolutely. Just go and look at the situation on the ground in Budapest, in Hungary, and you'll understand who are the real supporters of dictatorship and who are the real Democrats. Just saying.
They'll do their best to destroy that as well. The
Yeah.
EU. The EU will do their best to destroy that.
Well, they will.
Hungary as well.
We'll see how it plays out. And I should say, and I'm going to finish this otherwise rather dark video by simply saying this. So ultimately, and I do maintain this, the system is unsustainable. There are too many contradictions and dissonances beneath it. And of course, the economic system in Europe is simply running out of steam. I mean, it's becoming unstable in a way, by the way, that even the US, with all the things that are going on there, is not. And this can't be kept going indefinitely. But the amount of damage that's going to be done along the way great nations and great countries are being destroyed, but the way in which European culture, as it has existed, is being basically pulped, is just astonishing. And it's people who will look back will be amazed about it.
Yeah, well, the economy is running out of steam, but that's why you need a reset, and that's why they're going.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
For the reset.
You take it always a step further. At least that's what you say, and you attack and smear and bully and harass anybody who doesn't agree with you. But as I said, it can't be kept up indefinitely. These sort of things never are. In the end, they collapse under the weight of their own contradictions, and this is what will happen. But the difference is that will happen later rather than sooner, and in a far more damaging and disastrous way.
Look, we'll wrap it up here. But in my opinion, looking at the landscape right now, yes, France, yes, Italy, but I think they'll find a way to deal with those countries. Something tells me they will find an undemocratic way to rig those countries so they get the outcome they want. At the end of the day, it is Orban and the Hungarian people that are standing in the way between EU tyranny and just getting back to a normal, sovereign, free Europe. I mean, literally, this is it. It's Orban and the Hungarian people are the last ones left.
Yeah. Well, for the moment, as I said.
For the moment, as things stand.
As things stand, yes. Yeah, no, I agree at the moment. Yeah. Well, what I was talking about was the longer term. But, the longer term always comes as one of my teachers at university once told me, and he was absolutely right.
Yeah, well, maybe in historical terms, yeah. Maybe 70, 80, or 100 years may not seem like a lot in historical terms, but for everyone watching... Political time is another matter. I'm not disputing that. Don't think it will take 70 or 80 or 100 years. But anyway, their plan is 2030. So they're moving at breakneck speed to get it implemented. Indeed. Anyway, all right, guys, find us on the Duran.locals.com. Link down below. Duran Shop, 10% off. Take care.